This program is brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
Russia and China informed Iran that they do not support the use of sanctions or military force against the Islamic Republic because of its nuclear program. The Iranian Foreign Minister, Munashar Muttaqi, announced that both countries officially informed Tehran of their position, opposing sanctions or the like on the agenda of the United Nations Security Council. He added that the Europeans are not prepared at any time to come to an agreement that guarantees Iran the right to possess nuclear energy. He indicated that his country had requested 20 centrifuges for scientific purposes, outside the framework of the voluntary suspension as outlined in the Paris Agreement, but the Europeans refused. The 5 permanent members of the United Nations Security Council, along with Germany, are currently holding the emergency meeting in Paris regarding the Iranian nuclear file. Iran requested that the United Nations take quick and decisive steps in the face of the American threats and pressures, calling for a new solution to this file. The 5 permanent members of the United Nations Security Council and Germany, the 5 permanent members, are the United States, Russia, France, Britain, and China. The meeting is the first of its kind since the International Atomic Energy Agency announced last Friday the lack of Tehran's cooperation in providing information about its nuclear program. This meeting will pave the way for another meeting that will be held on May 9th in New York.
The Bush administration is determined to convince the partners of the United States to impose international sanctions. If the United Nations does not allow for sanctions, it may reach the level of force if the situation reaches a point where it is a threat to the security and peace of the world.
Their international obligation.
In reaction to America's blatant threats, Iran appealed to the international organization in grievance that was sent by the Islamic Republic's ambassador to the United Nations, Muhammad Jawad Tarib. It called on the international community to pay attention to these threats, requesting that it acts quickly and decisively towards the United States' position. Tehran has not wasted any effort to reach a diplomatic solution for its nuclear file. Ari Larijani, the Secretary of the Supreme National Security Council, called for a new solution in order to exit from this dangerous situation. Larijani indicated that reliance on Chapter 7 of the United Nations Charter will not force Iran to stop uranium enrichment. The Iranian public supported its government's position on possessing nuclear technology for peaceful purposes.
The West is trying to pressure our country, but we must resist the pressure. Possessing nuclear energy is our legal national right.
Iran, which has faced threats and isolation since the establishment of the Islamic Republic, today stands in front of a new threat that aims to deprive it from one of its most important civilian projects that is necessary for further development and self-sufficiency.
Head of Iran's nuclear energy organization, Reza Ghazadeh, said on Tuesday a new uranium mine explored in Bandar Abbas, southern Iran, absorbs less than expected capital to extract and transfer uranium ore.
Aghazadeh also said initial findings show that huge reserves of the mine, whose exploration is underway, are projected to produce 30 tons of yellowcake annually. He said the report by the International Atomic Energy Agency chief on Iran's atomic case has failed to satisfy Tehran. Aghazadeh added the report has been found in conflict with Iran's cooperation with the IAEA. He went on to say the Europeans have struggled to stall nuclear activities in Iran, and Tehran is ready to allay international concerns over its peaceful nuclear work. He concluded a working session of the IAEA can easily solve Iran's nuclear issue.
According to a CNN report on Tuesday, the Iranian citizens strongly support their country's nuclear program. The U.S. TV network's correspondent in Tehran interviewed a number of Iranian youths on the subject. One of them said Iran will run out of oil someday and it should think of an alternative energy resource, namely nuclear power. He added if the UN Security Council imposed sanctions on Iran, national unity and solidarity will get stronger. Another youngster at a ski resort told the CNN the United States cannot divide the Iranian people and government because the younger generation support the nuclear program.
A day ahead of a key report on the Iranian nuclear situation by the international nuclear watchdog, Iran's president rejected the UN call to halt enrichment, and speculation intensified about whether the United Nations Security Council will be able to reach a unanimous decision on Iran. Mohammad al-Baradei, chief of IAEA, released a report that tests confirmed Iran enriched uranium to level for fueling power plants, and that Iran did little to answer questions related to nuclear enrichment intentions. And besides that, Iran has accelerated uranium enrichment efforts. Meanwhile, Charles Ferguson, a fellow for science and technology at the Council on Foreign Relations in Washington, believes that the US might have other military options apart from a full-fledged military strike on Iran.
There are other options the U.S. could have. They could do some kind of limited military strike, do 1 or 2 day bombing run, hit specific activities in Iran, and create a pause and saying, okay, now if you don't cooperate with us, we can resume that air campaign again, and don't you try to retaliate against us because we can keep hitting you back. So there could be that kind of climbing the escalation ladder.
Meanwhile, former Iranian President Hashemi Rafsanjani warned the United Nations not to make trouble over its demand that Iran halt its nuclear program, underlining President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad's vow to continue to expand enrichment of uranium. Rafsanjani said in his Friday prayer sermon at Tehran University that a return to the negotiating table, not threats, were the way to deal with Iran's nuclear program. The cleric, still a powerful figure in Iran, urged the US and the UN Security Council not to seek confrontation with Iran.
The spokesman for the Palestinian Presidential Office has confirmed that the U.S. consul in Jerusalem, Jack Wallace, has advised President Abbas that the American administration will not hold talks with the Hamas-led government until it recognizes Israel and renounces violence.
In an unprecedented step, the Palestinian Prime Minister Ismail Haniyeh pleaded to Palestinian activists to refrain from launching attacks on border crossings due to their strategic importance of transporting humanitarian supplies to the Gaza Strip. Haniyeh's comments indicate that Hamas is changing its political tone and thus trying to conform to opinions of the international community.
We must protect vital Palestinian installations, including border crossings, which are considered to be the vital artery to the Palestinian people. We must stay away as much as we can from targeting border crossings and passages leading to the outside world.
دعوة هنية بإبعاد المعابر الحدودية عن الهجمات.
Haniyeh's plea to the Palestinian activists came nearly 1 week after the Palestinian Authority announced that its security forces seized a car packed with explosives near the Al-Mintar border crossing, which is used to transport goods to areas along the Israeli borders. Mr. Haniyeh held the American administration responsible for hampering assistance coming from the Arab and Islamic worlds to the Hamas-led government. Hamas is suffering from a deep financial crisis that may lead lead to a human disaster. In another related development, Mr. Nabil Abu Rudaina, the spokesman for the Palestinian Presidential Office, has confirmed that U.S. consul advised President Abbas that the American administration will not hold talks with Hamas until the latter recognizes Israel, renounces violence, and abides by demands of the International Quartet Committee. Mr. Abu Rudaina stressed that the Palestinian people should not be punished, and assistance must continue to flow to the Palestinians, and Palestinian funds withheld by Israel must be released. In another development, an explosion went off inside a compound belonging to the Palestinian security forces, killing 2 security sergeants and injuring 3 others.
Negotiations resumed in the city of Abuja in order to convince Sudanese rebels in the region of Darfur to sign a peace accord sponsored by the African Union. The AU also extended a deadline on the peace agreement for another 48 hours. Meanwhile, the assistant to the U.S. Secretary of State, Robert Zellick, is expected to arrive in Abuja to help peace efforts in Darfur. The AU is trying to bridge the gap between the rebels and the Sudanese government and resolve a number of outstanding issues in the Darfur region.
سلام طال انتظاره.
بقلق وترقب تمر الساعات 48.
Amidst a state of fear, the Sudanese started the countdown for the 48-hour deadline set by the African Union regarding the Abuja peace agreement.
سلام ينهي مسلسل سفك الدماء المتواصل في الإقليم. المهلة من المقرر أن تنتهي مساء الثلاثاء، ويبدو أن الأنباء القادمة من مقر انعقاد المحادثات في أبوجا.
Both the Sudanese government and the Darfur rebels must agree to ratify a peace agreement brokered by the AU. This peace accord calls for an end to bloodshed in the Sudanese southern region of Darfur. The deadline will end on Tuesday evening. However, reports coming out of the headquarters of the negotiations in Abuja are not too encouraging. The Sudanese Vice President Ali Othman Taha withdrew from the negotiations, saying that the rebels are not serious about holding real talks. Rebel leaders have refused to sign any peace agreements, saying that the new deadline is meaningless and a waste of time. The rebels demand that Sudan's vice president must be from the region of Darfur, and Khartoum must allow them to establish a local government in the region and must allow some of their fighters to join the Sudanese armed forces. According to many observers, these demands are not in the rebels' interests because they may lose the support and sympathy of the international community. Meanwhile, the Sudanese government exercised a great deal of diplomacy, saying that it will embrace and sign the Abuja peace agreement despite Khartoum's objection to some of the articles. The Sudanese government expressed concern over disarmament of only one side of the conflict in Darfur. Khartoum has been portrayed as the bad side in the Darfur conflict. Amidst fears that the Abuja peace accord may be aborted before it's even born, the assistant to the U.S. Secretary of State, Robert Zellick, confirmed that he will head to Abuja in order to put the peace process back on track. Meanwhile, massive demonstrations were held in major U.S. cities. Thousands of American protesters, including a number of Hollywood celebrities and political and religious officials in Washington, D.C., took to the streets in a show of solidarity with the people of Darfur.
لإنقاذ محادثات السلام المتعثرة في دارفور. أزمة دارفور ألقت بظلالها على واشنطن التي نظمت فيها مظاهرة شارك فيها الآلاف من فنانين وسياسيين وعلماء دين.
Darfur is the world capital city of human suffering. We come here to show solidarity with the people of Darfur, help elevate their suffering, and tell them that they are not alone.
According to many observers, today's protests and rallies pose many controversial questions, especially since many protesters held the Sudanese government responsible for the situation in the region of Darfur.
What this rally will do will tell them...
We joined this rally to express concern over the crisis in Darfur. There is definitely a human genocide going on in the region of Darfur, despite denial by the Sudanese government.
وهو ما تنفيه الحكومة السودانية. كما نظمت مظاهرات مماثلة في
Moreover, massive demonstrations and protests were held in 18 other U.S. cities. According to a number of observers, Washington is trying to rally the international community against the Sudanese government.
To shed more light on the topic, we are joined from Cairo with Mr. Atiyah Aisawi, an expert on African affairs. Mr. Atiyah, are we racing against time? The deadline is around the corner, and U.S. official Mr. Zelik is on his way to Abuja. If the agreement is not signed by the deadline as set by the AU, will the deal be void, or will the AU extend the deadline?
بالتأكيد نحن في سباق مع الزمن وربما يساعد وجود المسؤول الأمريكي في تذليل العقبات المتبقية.
Of course, we are racing against time. However, it is possible that the Americans may be able to resolve the impasse hampering the peace efforts and therefore convince the rebels to honor the peace agreement. On the same token, it is not necessary that the agreement must be signed in the next 48 hours as set by the African Union. In 1 or 2 months, the rebels may give up some of their demands, or the Sudanese government may offer more concessions, or both sides may concede simultaneously. For example, both parties that signed the Sudanese Southern Peace Agreement were compelled to offer mutual concessions after the negotiations were deadlocked and deadlines were extended numerous times. An agreement was finally reached on January 2005 as a result of mounting pressures from the United States, the United Nations Security Council, and Kenya.
الالتزام بها حتى تم تحت ضغوط شديدة من مجلس الأمن والولايات المتحدة وكينيا التوصل إلى اتفاق سلام في يناير 2005.
From Beirut to the industrial heartland of Germany, workers took to the streets around the world on Monday in largely peaceful May Day demonstrations for labor rights as immigrants in the United States staged a job boycott.
More than 5,000 people marched through Beirut yesterday to celebrate Labor's Day, carrying loaves of bread in protest against government policies in a country suffering deep economic and political crisis. Demonstrators at the rally organized by the Communist Party waved banners denouncing corruption, confessionalism, and indebtedness. Lebanon's public debt has spiraled to $38.6 billion, or about 180% of gross domestic product. Away from Lebanon, the crowds of workers swelled to 1 million across Russia, heeding the rallying call of unions to protest against low wages and poverty. In Germany, trade unionists brought out 500,000 workers in some 500 demonstrations nationwide in a show of force ahead of labor reform planned by the government of Chancellor Angela Merkel to boost economic growth. French unions, flushed with success after defeating a new labor law last month, held large rallies around the country to keep the heat turned on the weakened government to make further concessions. May 1st is a normal working day in the United States, which marks Labor Day in September. But this year, hundreds of thousands turned out for rallies in major cities as part of an unprecedented immigrant workers' boycott. Hispanic groups dubbed the protest a day without immigrants, urging people to stay home from work and school and avoid shopping trips to press for legalizing the status of some 12 million illegal immigrants living in the world's richest country. A peaceful march in Chile was marred by violence as youths overturned barriers in front of the presidential palace and broke shop windows. Police responded with tear gas and water cannon, arresting at least 30 people. Elsewhere in South America, Bolivian President Evo Morales used a May Day speech to announce the nationalization of the country's vast oil and natural gas resources. Over the weekend, Morales signed a trade pact with Cuba and Venezuela, presenting the alliance as a leftist alternative to U.S. free trade agreements in the region.
Our hard-working laborers and workers' union are not celebrating the International Workers' Day on May 1st this year. This comes at a time of unemployment that reached an unprecedented level. The workers have not been paid their salaries for 2 consecutive months due to the unjust international siege imposed by Israel and its allies against our people. The workers are no longer able to express their joy on the occasion of a holiday which is supposed to be a turning point in the history of humanity in a world free of oppression, killing and destruction.
An onlooker at the course of life may think it's moving slowly. One who delves deeper in the life of workers in the Gaza Strip will find shades of suffering that impede life's course. Adil Matar is a provider to a family barely making it today. He used to work and provide for his family in the occupied territories until 1948. Life was good then, but walls were put up and his means of livelihood was cut off.
أغلقت الحواجز وانقطع طريق الرزق.
Adil Ibrahim Khalil Matar.
How old are you?
43 years old.
Married or single?
Married.
For how long?
Since 1980.
How many children do you have?
11.
What do you do?
I used to be a worker in Israel before the Aqsa Intifada. Right now, I am unemployed. This is the 6th year without work.
Are there any other job opportunities you can find?
There aren't any job opportunities. There is high unemployment. All the unemployment applications I submitted have turned up with nothing.
There is no sadder moment than when a little boy asks for money to buy candy and his father has to look him in the eyes and turn him down.
The situation is difficult and really messed up. What can I do? This is life.
Of course, it's really hard for my son when he doesn't have any money to spend. It hurts his feelings. His father wants him to be the best. A father and a mother want the best for their children. I want happiness for my son.
هذا الطفل أخرجه أبوه من المدرسة.
This boy's father had to take him out of school because he was no longer able to pay the school fees. But the boy dreams of being a doctor one day so he can treat children for free.
الأطفال مجانا.
I want to go to college.
What do you want to study? What do you want to be when you grow up?
A doctor.
The workers' union plays a big role in lessening the burden of the worker. But what happens to the worker during difficult times equally affects the union. The situation is the same.
هل أصف هذا الصمود الأسطوري للطبقة العمالية الفلسطينية عندما صمدت هذه السنوات.
The legendary persistence that characterized the Palestinian working class for years is the work of the worker himself, as well as his wife and children. But at the same time, we hope to create a Palestinian network that can provide and protect social security until we can overcome this crisis and this conspiracy trying to undermine the Palestinian people.
وهذه المؤامرة التي تحاول ضد الشعب الفلسطيني.
هنا يحيي عمال فلسطين ذكرى الفاتح من أيار مايو.
This is where Palestine's workers commemorate the May 1st event in anticipation and hope for a better future. On May 1st every year, Palestinian workers celebrate Workers' Day. It was received quietly under harsh and difficult circumstances. The workers pray to God Almighty to lift their crisis and improve their conditions.
من معبر بيت حانون شمال قطاع غزة، شادي عصفور، تلفزيون فلسطين.
Dozens of Iraqi families are demonstrating in the capital Baghdad, demanding that the government return them safely to their homes and hand over their file to the Displaced Committee. The Iraqi Ministry of Immigration and Displacement estimates that more than 14,000 Iraqi families have been forcibly displaced from their homes by armed assailants since the beginning of the war on Iraq.
Displacement of Iraqi families is a widespread phenomenon in the country, precipitated by American aggression that aim to alter Iraqi demographics, and incursions by sectarian insurgents that aim to alter Iraqi demographics. The Iraqi government's attempts to find a solution to the problem have not satisfied the displaced families, who are demanding to return to their homes and to receive humanitarian assistance.
ونود أن نعلم الحكومة أن هناك العديد من أخواننا.
We would like the government to know that many of our people have not been able to leave the areas exposed to terrorist attacks. The people are making every effort to avoid these areas.
لما وجدوه من سوء الحالة التي نحن فيها.
Today's demonstration is to demand the rights of the displaced families. They have several demands, which include solving the root cause of the problem. They want to return to their homes, and the government should ensure that this happens safely.
The dire conditions lived by the displaced families call for immediate action by concerned parties. Everyone, especially children, feel wronged and persecuted.
They threatened my dad and killed him on the Hai Bridge. We want to go back to school. We were halfway through the school year and they shut it down after our midterms.
We're displaced and living in tents. No source of income, no homes, no food, no drink. We basically have nothing. We're demanding our rights today.
Every camp accommodates 1,000 people. They suffer from food and water shortages. The women are staying in the tents. The situation is really miserable. The government must do something for these displaced families.
The demonstrators want popular committees to be formed to protect their neighborhoods and the camps where they now live, especially since some families refuse to leave after witnessing the suffering of those who left their homes. The forcible displacement of Iraqi families from their towns has become a phenomenon that cannot be ignored. These families are demanding an end to this disease, which if left unchallenged will spread like an epidemic that cannot be contained.
العالم بغداد.
Ahmad Ibrahim believes in the saying that patience is a virtue. He attended school and college and overcame many challenges. He is a blind teacher, but his deep vision compensates for what he lacks in sight, especially in the history lessons he delivers to his students. Imam Muhammad has this report for us.
Rare determination and persistence and a belief in the ability to excel despite being unable to see. This is what Ahmed Ibrahim, a history teacher at Hilla Preparatory School for Boys, exemplifies. He shows us his perseverance in the work he does.
دخلت المدرسة كنت أعاني لكن الصبر كان يحطم كل المعاناة.
It was very challenging when I first attended school, but patience can overcome many challenges, step by step. I grew up and the problems grew with me, but patience was bigger than all. I bore all the difficulties. I majored in history and was a good student. I persevered under the circumstances and never wavered, even when Iraq was under duress. Even though my family was poor, I still persisted and remained patient in the face of challenges.
رغم فقرها ولكن كنت صامدا صابرا أتحمل كل المصاعب.
His colleagues and students express their admiration for him.
الأستاذ أحمد إبراهيم عبود أستاذ مادة التاريخ في إعدادية الحلة للبنين.
Mr. Ahmed Ibrahim Aboud, history teacher in Al-Hila School, is among the premier teachers in the Babylon province. He is considered a veteran teacher who's been in the profession for more than 40 years.
والعملية التربوية لفترة طويلة من الزمن ناهزت قرابة أكثر من 40 عام.
It was God's will that Ahmed Ibrahim is denied the ability to see. Instead, he was given sensitivity, determination, and a distinctive teaching style that enables him to communicate with students' hearts before their minds. Imam Muhammad Al-Sumariya, Babylon.
The views expressed on Mosaic are not those of Link TV or its sponsors, but of the broadcasters themselves. Mosaic is made possible by a grant from the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, which promotes journalism excellence worldwide and invests in the vitality of 26 U.S. communities, and the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. Additional support is provided by the Firedoll Foundation and Henry and Virgilia Dakin. This program is brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Link TV is the only U.S. television network devoted to global and national news, with uncompromising documentaries and diverse cultural programs which connect you to the world.